Society doesn't want to talk about menopause. And when they do, they don't make it sound very pretty. So, Walgreens is helping women change the perception and take back the narrative because nothing is sexier than being in control. Menopause is confidence. Menopause is power. Menopause is hot. Let's frame menopause together. Watch the Menopause is Hot story at walgreens.com/hot.
Did you know 39% of teen drivers admit to texting while driving? Even scarier, those who text are more likely to speed and run red lights. Shockingly, 94% know it's dangerous but do it anyway. As a parent, you can't always be in the car, but you can stay connected to their safety with Greenlight Infinity's driving reports. Monitor their driving habits, see if they're using their phone, speeding, and more. These reports provide real data for meaningful conversations about safety. Plus, with weekly updates, you can track their progress over time. Help keep your teens safe. Sign up for Greenlight Infinity at greenlight.com/podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This is the CRM Archaeology Podcast. It's the show where we pull back the veil of cultural resources management, archaeology, and discuss the issues that everyone is concerned about. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 315. And today I'm joined by Doug in Scotland.
Hey, everyone.
And Bill in Northern California.
Hello.
Hello. And I'm in, I don't know. I always go back and forth. I don't think I'm in Southern California. I consider it more Central Coast, but I'm south of Bill. And today,
I was going to say, we have gone over this before. None of us know the regions of California. People from California know it, but I don't even know where the hell I'm at.
Yeah.
Isn't San Francisco's like the middle of California, isn't it?
Yes. I think you're 2/3 the way up.
Oh, so then that
You're a little more
qualifies
than
as northern.
half.
But where's the boundary, though? Is it like Fresno or... Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I never know where I'm at
Well, that's
either.
called the Central Valley, right?
Yes,
We're Central
yeah.
Coast. I think I'm probably on the south end of the Central Coast. But anyway, today we are going to talk about, before we started the podcast, we were just like conversing about all the stuff that on social media and the disconnect between what we went through when we were in graduate school and those that are entering undergrad or whatnot, or entering all these, how to get into graduate school, how to even start your undergraduate career. What does that cost? How to get into the job market? What does that cost? Grad students working at the college and the unionization that's going on right now. And we have, I think, unreasonable expectations on some ends, actually on both ends. And then we have people opening their mouth, just making comments and giving advice based on their own experience, which could be 20 years old and is not really relevant anymore. So we just thought today we're going to cover a few topics, but we're talking about let's get through the noise of all this information that's coming out and maybe dispel a few misnomers and just talk about how do you ingest all that information and make actual decisions for yourself that are helpful and that you have creating your own perspective using information that's actually accurate.
Yeah, our whole conversation started off with a disconnect between when we went to college and what folks are going through now, because if you don't know, I teach at a university, and so D-Day's coming. Basically, I have to go back and actually start teaching in person again. And we were talking about how the advice you have to give a student now is a lot different than the advice that we were getting before in the early 2000s and in the late 1990s, and then how that's dramatically different from the people who've been doing this for 40 years, and how the advice that sometimes we give folks is not necessarily current with the events that are going on, right? Because one of the things that my students are absolutely, they want to know more than anyone can imagine, is this going to give you the wealth premium that they're looking for? And what they mean is it going to give you the increase in net worth across your entire career? That's the difference between getting this degree and just having a high school diploma. And the reason why they're super fixated on that is not a lot of times people will say, if this is your passion, then forget about how much money you're going to make. And they can't really forget about how much money they're going to make because just the simple act of getting a college degree is not like what it was when I went to school. You know, I got numbers are all over the place, but like from 2008 to 2021, public tuition at universities has increased like 20 or 72% on average. Just a $20 bill over the last 20 years has gone from $20 in 2001 to like $35 now. So if someone was getting paid like $20 an hour as an archaeologist in 2001, like when I first started, that was the wage. You'd need to be making $35 in 2023 or even more today for that to be the same level.
Entry level was paying 20 back in 2001. Entry level was paying 20.
Man, when
back
I
in
first started
2001?
off as a like seasonal field tech,
Yeah.
my first jobs were 2001, 2004, working for the Idaho Transportation Department as a part-timer. So I was only working like 25, 30 hours a week on a project, just Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was only getting paid like $14 or $15 an hour.
That's why I thought 20 was high. That's why I was going, what?
Yeah.
That seems high.
Yes, so that is high. And so like nowadays, if somebody's getting paid $20 an hour starting off, that's not the same as even getting paid $20 20 years ago. The cost of living is increasing. The university, if folks aren't aware, with the creative hack job that our government is doing with all these different funding sources for universities, the universities, we can talk some other day about the math behind how universities have the money that they have. But a lot of people are thinking that the bigger schools that are wealthy are living on these monumental endowments and that those endowments are what they're using to pay. No, that's not what they're actually in fact using. There's a combination of endowment, tuition, research grants, donations, and then just like inventions and other patents, along with government contracts. Like there's a huge basket of different kinds of revenue streams that universities are using. And they may have these gigantic endowments, but like Harvard and these other bigger schools, they're not just living purely on the endowment, right? So when they cut those research grants and other stuff, the university is not going to tighten its belt strap and go on a diet. It's going to jack up the other sources of revenue it has. And the easiest source is tuition. In the state of California, tuition at the place where I teach, if you were to go there for 4 years, you'd spend about $80,000 going there 8 semesters at this institution. And if you were going to borrow that purely in student loans, you'd need to make like $128,000 a year to be able to pay back the almost $900 a month in student loan payments that you'd pay on $80,000 that you took out. And so like when people are looking at archaeology, like that changes their sights and what they expect out of the industry and stuff. And so our advice of follow your passion, that can work to a certain extent, but only if it like maths out in the end. And for a lot of folks, it's not going to math out. Now, the reality is nobody's really paying that $80,000 unless their parents are all rich and they're trust funders, because at this institution, seriously, like 70 to 80% of the people are getting some form of financial aid, scholarship, tuition waiver, work at the university. There's a huge range of other things. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of, they're saying that it's $80,000 up front for the full 4 years, but through that entire time, like no one's going to really pay that because you'll get fellowships and other things to offset that. But at other schools, for example, I went to Boise State and got my undergrad there. And when I graduated in 2001, I was paying like $1,000 or $980 a semester or something like that. And now it's well over $7,000 a semester. And I don't think that Boise State is necessarily handing out the same level of undergrad assistance that these bigger schools that do have multiple streams of revenue that they are. So folks at Boise State are like borrowing that. And I don't know the math on that, but if you were to borrow that the whole time, I know that you would still need to make much more than an entry-level field tech to pay that back. And so folks are thinking about that. This is in the back of their mind as they start college. And parents, for sure, if they know what they're doing, they're giving the advice of go to college. The only acceptable degrees are the ones that are going to give you that wealth premium. I was given the advice, go to college because college is good. Don't go into the military. Just do college. Don't go into trades. You can get a degree and then go into trades, because when your body falls apart and breaks down, you need to have that degree to be able to feed yourself. So that was the advice I got. But it was like universally understood when I was younger that college is the only way to survive. You must do it. And that's just all there really is to it. I think advice now, after Gen X going through all this and being saddled with debt and being paying for it for 20, 30 years, I think we're telling our kids something different.
For sure.
Yeah. Also, I think, and this comes back to our conversation that we want to have on this episode, is just there's different perceptions and different experiences. And like what Bill was saying about 70% of the students, or now vary between different universities. But yeah, Bill's number is pretty good on not everyone's paying the sticker price at universities. But that is a huge difference. And something Bill mentioned, work. So work study. Some of people will know it, some won't. So if you can qualify for quote unquote financial aid, there's a thing called work study. And basically you can, if you qualify, if you're at certain universities, basically you can get a job at the university. Sometimes that comes with like a bit of a tuition waiver, or it literally just pays for it. But that has become such a bigger part of students' experiences where, you know, I think actually for all of us, we probably, I think, worked through all of our graduate school and all probably from our undergraduates. I know.
Man.
Yeah, like from our conversations we've had over the episodes, I'm pretty sure that we're the wrong audience for this because we always worked.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you go back 20 or 30 years, some of that financial aid was not based on you needed to work or anything like that. And it fundamentally changes a lot of what students could do. A rite of passage for archaeology, if you're going to become an archaeology and you're going to do an archaeology degree, is a field school. And that happens during the summer. And it used to be like everyone had their summer off, or maybe you'd have a summer job or anything like that. But like at this rate, and some of them need to actually like, they're now universities where you basically need to work full time. It used to you could do work study just during the semesters, just during the school year. But now if you want to keep those jobs so someone else doesn't take it, you have to basically work all the way through. So a lot of people now don't actually have that option of doing a field school, which a traditional summer field school. So I know some universities will do a field school. Essentially, it's a semester class. So you might have a local field school, and it might be like 12 credit hours or something like that, or 14, and it'll be a full semester long, and you could do it in that. But even then, if you're working, you can't actually participate in that. Because the way I've seen it, those would be like you go off and you do 2 or 3 days straight through, which you can't do with work study because you have to work certain days. So
yeah, I don't think work
it's getting
study's
a lot
all
harder.
I don't think it ever has been all it's cracked up to be. But then again, I mean, for some, I think it works. It's also an easy, you have young people who are going to school, and that's the option that they're given. I was a returning student. And so when I was given the option of work study, I looked at it and I'm like, I can make more money just at a regular job. So I turned down the work study. It didn't make sense to me. I also had scholarships. So I'm going to sound like the old, when I was in school, walking uphill both ways in the snow. Yes, I actually had 3 jobs. I was a single mother in grad school, and I hustled, and I was working full time, and I had a very cooperative boss. So I could leave early on some days for classes. I also was in a program that the graduate program, most of the classes were in the afternoon and evening. So that made it easier for me to work. And then one of my other jobs, so I had a full-time job, and I was in archaeology. I was a field tech. It was a full-time job. I was working on a federal project, so I was getting the prevailing wage, which at that time was way more than I would have gotten if I was in work study. And then I was a RA, so I had my rent was paid, and I was getting paid a stipend. And then on the side, I refereed ice hockey, and that was just gave me some extra. And all of those things, you have to get creative. And I think that the problem is that our understanding, a lot of kids are going into school And maybe their parents either don't understand what are the different options or walk them through it. So they just show up, and this is the first major decision they've made in their life. And they're trusting the college and the counselors at the university are going to give them the most advantageous advice, when really the university is just giving them the advice within their own little sector, and they're not looking at all these other options. And so when you're young, you're just presented, you're like, oh, okay, this is the way to go. And I was fortunate being a returning student. I had life experience behind me. And so I was able to make decisions that worked a little bit better for me and my situation. So why don't we go on to the next segment? We'll be right back.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.
Welcome back to CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 315. And today, Bill and Doug and I are talking about some of the disconnect and decisions that, and I don't know, disconnect in advice and perspectives that varying levels of people in our field, and how to wade through all that noise and make the best decision for yourself and to create your own perspective and plan for moving ahead and being successful in this discipline. Doug, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think it was a riff off of what you said, Heather. And I think that sort of also highlights how basically the calculations are changing as well. So like when you looked at it and you looked at work study and you're like, yeah, that's actually a pretty raw deal. But I'm also thinking of things like when people now do TA ships, or there's a bunch of different names, but essentially, especially for grad students, they'll be like, oh, we'll waive your tuition if you teach, and then they pay like a tiniest bit of stipend or whatever. But the calculation is so much different because essentially the big thing is like that stipend doesn't usually, depending on where you are, doesn't actually pay you to live. And then the problem is you're not making enough money, but because it's a TA ship, you basically are working 40, 60 hours plus doing a PhD. Or you're skimping on your students and doing the bare minimum prospect, which is why we always harp on go to community college, because there's a little bit more focus there. But yeah, but that's that. But just because of inflation, or tuition inflation, it's crazy. So I looked at this, and this was like I did years ago. So from mid-1970s to 2008 at my university where I went for undergrad, University of New Mexico, and tuition had gone up over 300%, and inflation was about 100%. So it was 3 times as expensive as it was just a few decades ago. And then, Bill, I think you had mentioned Idaho was went from 1,000 a semester to 7,000 or something.
Yeah, so Boise State went up 700% in the last 20 years. Yeah, and there's a combination of things going on here. Obviously, reality stuff, inflation occurs, but then also there's other factors when you're talking about a university, right? It's known I work at a unionized school. It's known that they're not paying livable wages to graduate students. And so rightfully graduate students have unionized. And I was on the fence about it. But then after watching the way that they have just hacked away at people's jobs and stuff, I think if you don't own your own company, unionization might be the only hope. I know it's not perfect, but dude, we got to figure out something. And so when it comes to me, I am definitely sympathetic and down with the union cause, even though I'm not a unionized employee. I get it. But on the other hand, that is creating a situation where folks' wages are going up and their benefits are going up. And every single time it's time to negotiate terms, I don't think really a lot of times graduate students understand their role in the university system and everything. And I think a lot of times there's a lot of thought that like they're the ones who are doing all the work. But that's not the reality because everyone there is doing work, right? The admin are all doing work. The chancellors that we love to bag on and say that they need to get canned, or at least some do, they're doing a bunch of work. Graduate students are doing a bunch of work. Now, the key is to find a way for any of those groups to not be doing too much work, right? That's the thing. Like you're not born to work, you're born to live. I think that a lot of times there's a disproportionate like valuation of their labor and what they're doing as graduate students. And I think that professors are also just as guilty, dude. Yeah, we're making the product, but it's not like we're the only ones at this entire institution that are doing everything. So seriously, being more realistic about like your role in the machine, that's important. But as folks get paid more and more as graduate students, it eliminates the possibility for there to be future graduate students. And we're getting close to a tipping point where like folks are getting, because the university does not kick down additional money to cover graduate students when they ask for more. So every union victory is actually a victory for the people who are there right now. It'll mean that there's fewer people in that position in the future, fewer postdocs, fewer PhDs, because the university is not going to kick down money to departments to pay them. And so once again, the math on revenue streams and everything is extremely complicated. I don't understand it all, but I think that when you work in the machine, you understand better than someone who's just going to be there for 5 years and then is going to walk away. People who are there 10, 15, 20, 40 years have a better understanding of what this entire system's all about. So we're getting to the point where graduate school is going to be exceptionally difficult for people at the PhD level because they do get their tuition paid for. They get these graduate student stipends and stuff like that. And all that costs the university more. And the university is not designed to give anything to any of us. It's designed to take. Not only take money, but take time, take emotions, take everything. It'll take. It's like any other corporation. It will take. And so the more you give to it, the more it eats. Right. So if people think that by getting more wages and more benefits and stuff at this graduate student level is actually going to enrich their experience, I think they're shortchanged or they're shortchanging themselves because they're just going to increase the amount of labor and the amount of expectations out of people, or they're going to essentially eliminate that position altogether. So I foresee much more growth in master's programs because master's students don't get GSIs and TA positions. And I see a new kind of job position being created that's more like of a classroom aide. That's an actual salaried position of someone with a degree in education or degree in anthropology or whatever that's doing the job of the TA, because we're not going to have as many PhDs. We're just not going to have that many people at that level.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be like a fundamentally different experience. It already is a fundamentally different experience than what we did a decade ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm gonna sound like a boomer. I'm not a boomer, but I am gonna sound like Generation X. But I think a lot of the issues, yes, I do think the dollar doesn't go as far as it did when we were in school. But here's the other thing: there's so much consumerism on university campuses, the enticing students to spend money that they have no business spending. And we didn't have coffee. We didn't have Starbucks and Coffee Bean and all that on. And maybe we did, but not to the level that it is now. And I wouldn't have even dreamed of spending $5 on a coffee every morning or every day that I go to school, right? I buckled down. I spent very little. And I think your comment on the valuation also. So you don't just, this is something that I see people that are new to entering the job market, where they're coming in and they think that they should be able to enter the job market and make a good living where there's no sacrifice. And that's not how life works, because no matter how much you make, you're always going to want more. Think of it 20 years from now when it's not like you're entering the workforce and that you should be paid without having any sacrifice. You have to live, you have to understand and right size your lifestyle to your station in life. If you're just starting off, you're not going to be able to drive around in a BMW. That's not how life works. You have to work towards that level, right? You work up towards that level. And the more that we are convincing people that they can come in at their entry level and be making a mid-level rate is ridiculous. Like, people need to right size their expectations. Now, that doesn't mean that they should be living in poverty. Of course not. But the people I'm seeing are coming in, what they're expecting to be making is not reasonable. Not all, but a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, totally. But I think that the students that I'm working with, man, they're not eating out and they're not getting coffees, dude. And also that's like small potatoes, because the actual rent they're paying is eye-watering compared to what I was paying. Yes. Even if you were to adjust that thing, like Doug was saying, for inflation, but also like just overall everything. Like, you're not talking, it's not just consumerism, man. It's just straight predation on students.
I agree.
People around that area, they seriously are like jacking up the price just because they're students, right? They get absolute hovels that I would not rent, really. Like when I first moved here, I looked in the city where my university's at and just laughed at that. Man, this is garbage. Went to the next little suburb. It's 1 mile over. Rents were hundreds of dollars less. And the apartments were in better condition. Why? Because it's not next to the university. Like everybody is trying to prey on these kids. And it's not $5 coffees, man. It's everything. It's their car insurance. It's their health insurance. It's their rent. It's every corner that they're going. And so I think they're doing the best that they can given the cards that they're dealt. But seriously, our society has decided that the college time is where we just extract from these kids at the highest. Maybe it's happening to all of us, but I see it from students.
That's my point of the consumerism on these universities are creating villages where oh my goodness, the company store where you work in the mine. I don't know if it's just the university. It's like, it's every company around it. It's all around it. And I get it. Yeah, I get it. But that's where also though, listen, I think the only way that we can help and actually be giving correct advice to young people entering school and in the entering the work market is to be honest with them. You do have to sacrifice. You do, and it's not just about the coffee. That's just an example of it. But when I was in school, I saw people taking out loans left and right to get nice cars. That is not appropriate. And it was not an every now and then thing. It was happening. Like I was in graduate school because I'm a returning student later than typical for my age set. And I would say half the people in the family housing and graduate housing were driving around very nice brand new cars and using loans to do it. Like not car loans, like they were living beyond where they should have been living and they were using student loans to do it. And that's just, we can't, sometimes the money ends up just it almost ends up not meaning anything anymore because it's so much and it overwhelms you. And so people just, you know what, I'm going to be in debt anyway. I'm just might as well have fun with it. And so I think part of the college experience really needs to be being taught financially how to be responsible. And that's what counselors should be helping students with, because a lot of them are not getting that from their parents.
No.
Yeah.
You guys, like empirically, are both correct. So there's really good economic papers. There's been going on. So like a lot of times they blame like chancellor's salaries and admin. And actually, there's a lot more admin at universities, but in a way, that more admin is because universities are more complex and you get more for it. Even if you're complaining, you now have people who are there who are career advisors, which was not a thing that you ever had like in the 1950s or 60s. Or you are actually getting professionals there. Whole different podcast about the advice they give and anything like that. But it is different. But the actual real, but the real price, the real driver of why tuition's going above inflation, and it has gone above inflation since 1976 or 78. I can't remember the year. Basically and that was when inflation was kicking off and was at like 10% as well. Tuition has never gone below inflation since 1970s. And a lot of that is being driven by essentially universities are completely different. And a lot of that's actually the buildings. So like LSU has a lazy river in the shape of LSU at the campus to attract students. So all this money is actually being spent on new buildings that are ridiculously expensive and new like rock climbing walls and all that stuff. And you can argue, do you actually need that and all that stuff? But it's gotten into this competition because students see it and they're not going to do it. And Bill's also right. Basically, again, economics is, for the most part, there's very little stoppage on what you can take out on loans. Like they keep increasing your student loans and the amounts you can do. And basically it has become very predatory because and it goes back to exactly what you were saying, Heather, is you've lost like 80,000 or 100,000. Do you, like at that point, do you even know the difference of how much money that is everywhere around, basically because they keep increasing the amount of money you can take from students. everyone wants a piece of that. And it keeps going at a rate that's, I don't know when the bubble is going to pop.
They just issued some statement about like capping student loans or passed something in their new horrific ideas of the central government. There's going to be some kind of cap on how much you can take out as an undergrad. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to universities, because what I guarantee is going to happen is Chase Manhattan's going to hop on the bandwagon and be like, oh, the government won't give you any more, but we sure will. Here you go.
Yeah.
Just at 12%, just a very easy 12 to 16%.
Exactly. Yeah. Then once again, because it's student loans, you can never discharge through bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So you're basically ruined for life at 21 years old.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can keep on, but I think we need a break though, right?
Yeah.
All right. We'll be right back.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.
Welcome back to CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 315. And today we're talking about, right sizing. I just keep changing the theme based on our last conversation, but right sizing expectations, trying to get through all the noise of older students or older people in the market having their own perspectives and actually what the reality of the current students and new workers in our discipline are experiencing. And Doug, you had something, speaking of CRM, that you wanted to add.
Yeah. I was going to riff off of what you were saying earlier, Heather, where people are coming in with unrealistic expectations on what they want their salary to be. I think it's hard to tell because you don't really have the empirical data on this. Again, the most recent generation has lived a completely different life than any of us. Like we were there when like social media was starting, but they basically have grown up with like social media, which is a complete bubble, more so worse than like the TV we grew up with, where you'd see all rich people on TV, but then you could walk outside into like your neighborhood and realize, not everyone has a Lamborghini or a massive mansion, all that fun stuff. But so much of it is online now, and such a much higher level of fakery that you see than in the past, that I think people are coming out. And I also think when I say we as archaeologists don't help things as well. I'm just thinking back, it's no longer the case because the economy's not quite kicked off as much as it was. But a couple of years ago, basically, archaeology, I'm going to use UK as an example. Like a couple of years ago, it really kicked off, especially with the boom out of COVID. Massive need for archaeologists. And you'd go onto any of the forums, anything, and people would be like, oh, we're desperate for staff. We're desperate for staff. But you'd keep getting the same story over and over again, like almost every week. I've seen this on some of the field tech Facebook groups in the US, where basically someone come out of university and they'd be like, I've just sent out like 100 CVs or resumes or cover letters. I've emailed a bunch of people. I've occasionally got an interview, but I've been doing this for 6 months, a year, whatever. Insert a certain amount of time. And they'd be like, I'm not getting a job. And then people would be like, oh, no, you must be doing something wrong, yada, yada. What are you doing? And they'd run through like the lists of, I've looked up the SHPO record in my state or all the states around me. I have pulled off all the people with permits. I have emailed them all my CV. I'm posting here on this Facebook group. I've called everyone. I've gone to my state archaeology conference. I've done 6 field schools. At this point, I'm exaggerating, guys. I like to exaggerate if you haven't noticed on the podcast.
No.
It would be like they'd have multiple, they'd have 2 or 3 field schools, and they've done an internship in their university laboratory and all this stuff on paper that would have done it. But the problem is Great Recession. A couple of years before this happened, in the UK, we lost 1/3 of our archaeology positions. It just wiped out. And basically that wiped out almost the entire tech level. And you had things where you had a crew that would basically be made up of it'd be all so to translate to the North American, it'd be all tech level. But everyone had previously been like a crew chief or a project manager or whatever you want to use, different terms. But basically, they're all at the tech level because there were no jobs, because a third of the positions had gone. It was horrible. And so you had people with 10, 15, 20 years of experience doing entry-level jobs. And you could literally, it was not unheard of having a crew of maybe half a dozen people and having 100 years worth of archaeology experience on that crew.
I remember those days. It was awesome.
Yeah. I mean,
everyone was a guru and everyone knew everything, and half the people had masterses.
Yeah, or PhDs. Like, honestly, at one point when we did it, now like 60%, it may have gone down, but like 60, 70% of archaeologists in the UK have a postgraduate degree. Like, you could be, everyone had like a master's, everyone had 20 years of experience. And you didn't have to, you could just put up a job advert and you'd get 100 people coming in with 10, 15 years of experience, masters, PhDs, everything. And so when it expanded and we finally got over that, so we've actually added 50% more positions, all that stuff, those employers were still basically in that mindset of, I'm not going to hire this person. They only have like 2 field schools.
Yeah.
Where I used to be able to get someone who had 20 years of experience that I didn't need to train. I didn't need to do anything. And so they'd always be like, oh yeah, we're desperate for staff. But they were with staff they were desperate for were those people with 20 years of experience and a master's and someone they didn't have to train and that they could basically send out and do the work of three newbies.
Yeah.
And so there's this massive disconnect, but no one would ask those questions. And like, everyone would just hear the message, oh, there's plenty of jobs. And so the students would come out just thinking like, they're horrible human beings. They must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
When they were doing basically everything right.
Uh-huh. And in some ways, like we all just need a chance at some point, but it's really hard to get that chance. Like if every other person you're going against has 10 years of experience.
It's nearly impossible.
Yeah, just as somebody who hires, I really am looking for someone who's trainable. That's what I'm looking for. And if that means it doesn't matter, I actually prefer to hire people that don't have a ton of experience because they tend to be more trainable. You can have people that come in with a lot of experience. They think they know everything and they're not interested in looking at the ways that the company that just hired them wants them to work. And that is something that's really important. Yes, I think there's a misunderstanding there. So you're hiring somebody with experience. For me, if I'm hiring somebody with experience, it's because I'm hiring you because you have the critical thinking capabilities. You understand that CRM is a business. You know how to work within that environment. You know how to make decisions in the field. We don't have to hold your hand through every single decision in the field. It's those types of skill sets that I'm hiring an experienced person for. But if I'm hiring an experienced person and that person is coming in saying, I'm going to bring the way that I worked at this last company, and I'm expecting this new company I'm going to work for to work around the way I work, that's something that I'm seeing is an issue. I'm also seeing sometimes we have, as academics are losing, we're not having as many teaching positions, and academics are coming into the CRM realm. They don't quite understand how to work within the CRM environment. And that's a frustration too. And we could actually probably do a whole podcast on that because I'm very supportive of giving academics a chance and allowing them another avenue, especially since these positions at the university are starting to dry up. But they have to be able to work within the system. They can't come in with a PhD and think that they know everything and they have nothing left to learn. That's a problem. And that's an attitude no matter where you work and what kind of discipline you're in. It is not conducive to being successful in any business. So I'm actually really curious, Bill.
Yeah.
You had talked a little bit earlier about some of the actions and people fighting for their bettering the workforce or bettering or the unionization. And sometimes people, if
Sure.
these efforts are not done in a very thoughtful way, looking at it from all perspectives, sometimes it backfires. And I'm curious because I see that. You were mentioning you're seeing that in the university. I definitely see that potential in the CRM workforce. I'm curious if you could expand on that thought.
Sure. Doug did a great job of episodes ago. I'm like a few episodes, probably 100 episodes ago, talking about unionization and its effects in archaeology and like what we can realistically expect from unionization. But it's like a whole maelstrom of different elements that are all coming together in 2025. And so a couple I'll give you is, since the recession, the government has not replaced funding for higher education. Meanwhile, everyone's wages have gone up. And also, just like Doug was saying, they got to keep building because they got to bring more students in. And episodes ago, I talked about the enrollment cliff. That's a major component too, that basically we have fewer Americans. 2025 is actually the year that we will have the most college age Americans that we can expect for the next 20 to 40 years. And so with that competition, unless we increase immigration, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon, every university is competing for every single student. And Lazy Rivers and other stuff, they bring people in, right? Because not every student is thinking about the math. And so they're trying to recruit more students, right? Another thing that students are pushing for is some kind of relief, right? Because as everything gets built up more, tuition goes up, everything's more expensive, people need more financial aid. And when it comes to graduate students, they're pushing for their rights to more benefits and more wages, right? So all of that stuff increases the overhead of the university itself. And how is it going to get that, right? So through that basket of things, more inventions, more deals with private companies, more government contracts, more of all that stuff, but basically essentially more. It needs to produce more in order for that to happen. And so when it comes to faculty, there's not necessarily an incentive in anthropology to recruit faculty who are going to make those public-private connections, right? No university is actively trying to recruit the SHPO to be a professor there to teach historic preservation law in the state as a way to make sure that more CRM contracts come that way, or that they get to do the review that the SHPO used to do the review, right? No one's really thinking entrepreneurial at universities. They're thinking about like, how can we get another Pokemon card that shows that we do archaeology in another interesting part of the world so that we can add that to our prestige level, right? When you have job announcements, they'll be talking about real needs that the department needs, right? Folks are retiring. They want to go in a different direction. They want to start doing research in a different area. But no one is, you know what? Hey, let's have a job post and then let's go around to every CRM company and find mid-level PIs that can teach archaeology fieldwork and possibly steal a bunch of CRM contracts from companies. Like, they're not thinking of that. They're not thinking about, if they are having a CRM program, they're not thinking about starting their own CRM business up again as a way to get more money for graduate students to have higher wages and stuff.
That used to be a thing.
Yeah, I know that used to be a thing, right? Before when we were young and in elementary school, that was a thing. Like when we were a twinkle in our parents' eyes, that was a thing. It's
Even
not a thing, right?
When I was in grad school, we had that.
But I mean,
at my school.
in optometry, they are thinking about making deals with medicine. In the legal school, they are thinking about doing that. In anthropology, they're not. So they're sticking with the same old thing from the 1800s of have a guy that digs holes in Africa, have a guy that digs holes in the Caribbean, have a guy that digs holes, and then just change up the race and the face of that person. But it's still the same old system. And so some schools will wisen up and they didn't lose their CRM program, or they do see a place in having an applied anthropology or a CRM master's or something like that. And so they will roll out those programs. Most schools will stay with the same old antiquarian Pokemon thing of just get more professors that are from different parts of the world. And like I said, like, all this stuff, like the students are all changing, environment's all changing. Academia and anthro departments should be changing, but they're 50 to 70 years behind the curve of what the rest of the country is doing.
I think it's, I was just going to say one thing. There's, without going down a rabbit hole, the people have got to think broadly about, in an entrepreneurial sense, just like Bill was saying, because even that CRM idea in California, that's not going to work. Why is that going to work? Because in the Constitution for both CSUs and UCs no longer can have any Native American materials on campus. So you're not going to be able to do CRM in California unless you're only sticking with historical, and that's not going to work, or historic archaeology, that's not going to work. Yeah, but people have got to start getting out of the box. It can't be just doing the same old.
We're not allowed to think entrepreneurial. We're not allowed to think about anything besides just the one thing we got our PhD in, because that's what we're supposed to do until we move up to chancellor. That's it. Like, you get to do this, then you get to be assistant dean and department head and all that, and you get to be a Zoom meeting person and a paper pusher, but you're not allowed to grow business. Leave that to the fat cats that are building the lazy rivers.
Well, how does these other disciplines do that then? How's the medical fields? How are they doing it? You just said the ophthalmology by
providing services for the industry.
Right.
Yeah, they make inventions and then they sell that and they spin off their students. Yeah.
But somebody there is thinking
the model exists.
So why can't anthropology do it? Why can't anthropology do it? Because you're saying they're stuck
I'm trying,
back
Heather.
in the
If I can bring it all together, I think this goes back to our whole different perspectives and things changing, but people still being stuck in a previous mindset. If you look at the hiring, so I've done the numbers for the better in the US, but UK, 1970s, you had about a 50% chance if you had a PhD of getting an academic job. That's now under 10%.
Right.
But everyone is still stuck in that mindset that it drops every year. So even when it was hard, and it's survival bias. So people who got a job are like, oh yeah, I got a job, so there must be jobs. In the US, it was again at 50%. It's now about 20%. So only about less than 20% of PhDs are going to get an academic job. But everyone who gets an academic job went through that same process. Occasionally you get a few outliers where a particular program has maybe hired a CRM person or something like that, or they've gone back to academia after 20 years in CRM. But it's the whole perception. And they're still stuck. Everyone's stuck in that perception that this is how you do it. You get a thesis, you maybe write a book, you get a job, you teach, you wait your 6 years for assistant or 8 or whatever it is, and then you get tenure, and then you're associate, and then it's the same process. But people are stuck in the time period of whenever they did it. They're still stuck in 1990, 2000. And those are the people, because academia takes so forever, I'm assuming, Bill, just from my looking at it, but likely the people in charge of your department, are they maybe somewhere in their 60s or 70s?
Gee, how'd you guess?
Yeah, I can tell. I've looked up every single academic department in the UK and the US, and I can go and look at the chairs. And
the whole thing is rigged so that no one young will ever have power or ever be able to make decisions.
Yeah, and it's basically people making decisions on what life was like in 1980
in the
or
90s.
1990s.
Yeah. 1993.
The revolution.
And actually, that was when we had a boom, an actual boom in 80s weren't the greatest, but there was actually a boom. So there was actually better chances of getting jobs in academia then. So again, it's people are stuck in their perceptions, and we just pass along the same, I'm not going to say bad advice, but advice not always based in reality.
This is how, for me, I think there needs to be a revolution. It's going to take 10, 20 years.
Well, it is happening.
So that it's going to take a while, but a revolution can happen. So those people that are 70 eventually, like Bill, when you're 70, hopefully I know you will, because I know you are going to have a different perspective than the 70-year-olds now, and you are going to be changing things.
Yeah,
but
man.
In the meantime,
I'm not waiting until I'm 70, dude.
Right.
I'm doing it now. In my lab, the work studies are field techs. We do projects for the NPS and other organizations. I bring in contracts and hire students to do the job and pay them. So in my lab, it already is changing.
Yeah. In the meantime, and I thank you for that. I applaud you. I use you as an example all the time when I'm talking about what can be done right in universities. But in the meantime, students also need to smarten up, and they need to. I know lazy rivers are nice, but you have to look at what is college going to do for you, in your career. Use university, college experience for exactly what it's meant to be, not for you to escape reality for 4 more years. You get in, you take every opportunity to gain experience. You get the classes done that you have to get your degree, and then you get out of there. Don't be spending money use your loans for what it's meant to be used for, at least what it should be meant to be used for. We're talking about how consumerism is changing that, but you have to you're spending your money on education. You get in, you get out, and you go get a job. That's what the university experience should be about. It should be about preparing yourself for getting a good job. That's it. And not all this extra stuff. Because if you buy into and think, the universities, they have my best interest at heart. It's their job to make sure that I'm being fully prepared. They don't care about that. Honestly, they don't care. They only care about making money. So the students have got to smarten up just like the professors do. And with that, I think we're going to call it an episode that maybe can lead to more episodes. But thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you in the field.
See you later.
Goodbye.
That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.arcpodnet.com/CRMArcPodcast. Please comment and share anywhere you see the show. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website, or just email chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Support the show and the network at arcpodnet.com/members. Get some swag and extra content while you're there. Send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye. The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Cultura Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with AutoQuote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.